Belfast.
Disorder we saw on the streets of Northern Ireland last night, to express my best wishes to the two officers who were injured last night in seeking to protect the public. And of course I want to express my thoughts once again to Mr. Ogilvie, who was the victim of this appalling attack, and to wish him all the very best. Nothing can justify the violence that we saw on the streets of Northern Ireland last night, with masked thugs trying to burn and intimidate people out of their homes. Those organising these protests claim they're doing so to protect communities. In fact, they're doing the very opposite. They are damaging communities and hurting people who are innocent and who have been terrified by what they have been through last night. It is utterly shameful and it needs to stop now. John.
No, thank you, Secretary of State. Thanks for coming this morning. I'd also like to say I spoke to the Prime Minister this morning about the events last night. Last night was an act of self-harm by the people involved against the incredible communities in Northern Ireland. What we saw last night was an insult. It was an insult to the victim of the terrible attack that many of you will have watched online and that led to these disturbances. It was an insult to the members of the public who stepped forward courageously to stop that attack, and the police officers then arrived very quickly to arrest him. Please, please, please let the criminal justice process take its course. This morning at Belfast Magistrates Court, an individual faced the court charged in relation to what we saw online. Let that follow due process. And I appeal for everybody in Northern Ireland who may have any sense of people involved last night to take control of their actions. If it's your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, people in your sports clubs, neighbours that you think were out last night, stop them from coming out today. This has got to stop. We cannot have a society that allows this to happen. We have to make a stand. So please, no more.
Okay, so BBC, morning, both, thank you. Chief Constable, firstly, you described what happened last night as an act of self-harm. You'll be aware that schools in parts of Northern Ireland have taken the decision to close early today. There's the potential for more protests. Again, how concerned are you about these potential further acts of self-harm, and how can your force begin to get a grip on what could unravel very, very quickly here? And to the Secretary of State, there were calls for calm yesterday from all political leaders across all walks of life. Clearly, they didn't work. This is now the third summer in a row that Northern Ireland is facing into disorder like this. What can you begin to do? Is this going to be the new normal?
If I begin, firstly, to get a grip. So last night, the men and women of the PSNI, again, got in harm's way to stop people from being intimidated and assaulted by these thugs. I also have to pay huge accolades to the fire service and our ambulance service, who were a credit to their professions yesterday. I'll remind everybody that last year we faced disorder, literally 12 months ago. After that disorder, 100 people faced prosecution through the investigation that we then undertook. Many of those people are now going before the courts and getting custodial sentences. We will deal with this. We will be on the streets tonight in numbers even more than we were last night, and we have got arrangements in hand to get mutual aid that will be arriving here tomorrow, and we're looking to get a further some 200 officers to get on the streets to deal with this. These young people who are doing this are changing their own lives for the future. They won't have the opportunities they would otherwise have had. So please, please, please think of that if you know anybody who could be involved in this. And as regards the schools and businesses and people who live in these neighbourhoods that have been affected, I completely understand, having witnessed the events of last night and I was out in Belfast, why people would make that decision. I support people who make that decision to make sure they're keeping their school children, their employees, their businesses safe. This will pass. I hope last night was the event that will see the end of any more protest, because we cannot have any more of this. And we will be, as I say, out in very high numbers this afternoon and this evening, policing whatever happens in Belfast and wider Northern Ireland today.
This is a time when political leadership is required, and I welcome very much that right across the political spectrum in Northern Ireland we saw those appeals for calm yesterday, led by the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister at the press conference they had with the Chief Constable, because this is when leadership is tested. Now, your question goes to the heart of the people who are doing this, because it falls upon them to decide, are we going to continue trying to attack people, burn people out of their homes, leaving children absolutely terrified as they're taken out into the dark with flames and screaming around them? This is not what Northern Ireland is. This is not the great place that is Northern Ireland, and it is their responsibility to stop. And the Chief Constable, I think, made a really good point, because about family members and others who will know, well, where were you last night? What were you doing? Because the responsibility is on all of us, political leaders included, but on all of us to say, stop doing this. And as to your last point, this is not normal.
Okay, UTV?
Good morning, gentlemen. My question to both of you, to the Chief Constable. What does it say to you if there's one night of disorder and you've had to apply for mutual aid, and you have warned again and again that you don't have enough police officers, one night of violence and you have to ask for help? What does that say to you about maybe not being given the funding and the support that you need politically? And to the Secretary of State, you'll be aware that one of the big issues in all of this has been how this man came to Northern Ireland. There have been repeated warnings about a porous border, about the common travel area being abused. That has all come to pass, hasn't it? And what are you doing?
Shall I take your question first? I am about to lay a written ministerial statement in the House of Commons, because when I answered the urgent question yesterday, I promised MPs that I would provide further information about the immigration status of the man who has now been charged and how he came to Belfast. That I will do. The common travel area is a long-standing arrangement between Ireland and the United Kingdom. There is already close cooperation between the Border Force, the PSNI, the Gardaí and the authorities in Ireland in trying to tackle illegal migration. And obviously we will need to reflect on the particular circumstances of this case. But what is at fault here is the person who committed this dreadful attack on Mr. Ogilvie. That is what we need to focus on. It is an individual who, it appears, has chosen to do this, and I agree with John that it is for the legal system and due process to determine how that is judged and what sanctions should then be applied.
Viewers listening around the world, we're just going to say goodbye to you, but of course here in the UK we will stay with that news conference. Let's listen back into Hilary, Benn.
Chosen to do, because the ultimate responsibility rests with that person, and that's what we're all appalled by. John.
Thank you. I want to really endorse those comments. And to the question of resources, when I arrived in 2023, having been in policing for a very long time, I could not believe the numbers of officers that this organisation had declined to, the lowest in its history. We are in a period of recovery, but that recovery needs to be sustained and it needs to be supported. Policing in Northern Ireland is uniquely complex, and we cannot let the police service of Northern Ireland down with regards to our funding, and we have done for some 14 or 15 years. So between Westminster, the executive and this organisation, We need to come up with a plan to support the long-term sustainability so that we can deal with the very unique events that we face in Northern Ireland in a way that our communities deserve to keep them safe. You do not get the events of last night, thankfully, elsewhere in policing generally. It happens repeatedly here. There's questions to be asked about that. And we can't deal with these issues if we've not got those community officers in those communities that need our support, problem solving, understanding young people and changing the pathways for their lives. We have huge gaps. The officers out on the street last night and who will be out there tonight are from our crime teams. They're from investigations into terrorist cases. They're from our domestic abuse teams. This has to be the entire organisation coming together to deal with issues like this, and we will. And we will identify and prosecute those responsible. But the organisation deserves and needs to be supported. And wherever I am the Chief Constable of this organisation, I'll be making that very clear to everybody.
Mr. Benn, just to follow up on the discussion there about the common travel area, we know that the suspect came from Dublin. How concerned are you, seriously, in light of the events of the last couple of days, that the common travel area is open to exploitation? And you mentioned there, you used the word that you will need to reflect on this. What do you mean? That sounds like politician talk. What do you mean by that? If you wouldn't mind explaining. And Chief Constable, you called for calm yesterday, you called for calm yet again today. The protesters were not listening to you last night. What makes you think they're going to listen today?
Well, to answer your question, the common travel area, as you know, is a long-standing arrangement which brings great benefit to the citizens of the Republic of Ireland and of the United Kingdom, and many people in Northern Ireland go across the non-existent border to go to work, to worship. When I said reflect, I'm talking about the circumstances of this particular case. I spoke briefly last night to Helen McEntee in Ireland about this because, of course, people will be seeking more information about the precise movements of the individual, and my written statement sets out, when it is published, what we know from the suspect themselves about how they said that they arrived. But the common travel area is really important, but we have a job to try and enforce immigration law, and that is why there is already close cooperation between the authorities in the United Kingdom and Ireland in trying. Well, in this particular case, an individual has been accused of committing a very, very serious offence. The fault lies with the person who has been charged and not with others who quite legitimately are able to come to countries across Europe and claim asylum, and if their case is justified. We have a long and honourable tradition in Britain of providing shelter to those who are fleeing the most appalling circumstances. In some cases, not that dissimilar to the appalling circumstances we saw on the streets of Northern Ireland last night.
So you're right. Yesterday we got all the political leaders together, we got civic leaders together, and everybody called for calm after this awful, awful assault. And we asked for everybody to let due process take its course. I can tell you a lot of people did listen to that. And a lot of people who were going to go on the streets did not go on the streets. I also have to acknowledge a number of community leaders and politicians who are out there trying to ensure that people behaved. And there was a lot of peaceful protest in Northern Ireland yesterday. Lawful, sensible, proportionate, peaceful protest. I would ask for everybody, again, to step up to make sure that those that were involved last night look at what they did last night. Look at the damage it's caused to their futures. Think about the consequences for their families, their neighbourhoods, their communities. It's very easy as young people to get carried away with a tide. It's very easy, these days especially, to look online and be persuaded by people who know nothing about Northern Ireland, know nothing about the communities in Northern Ireland, know nothing about the history of Northern Ireland, to take actions that they otherwise would not take. Stop looking at this nonsense. Stop listening to these idiots. We will be going after them for the incitement that they've been doing. Everybody, please, think about what happened last night and the terror that you caused to innocent families. A young family with a 2-month-old baby being evacuated. Let's just think about the society we want to live in. Let's stop that. Let's stop it.
You're going to follow up on people inciting online?
Yes.
Who are you talking about?
I'm not talking about individuals in this press conference, but people will know who were online last night and inciting this behaviour. They will know what they were doing, and we will be going after them. I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about the people that we will be investigating, as we did last year, and we prosecuted those individuals successfully. And that will happen again. There are consequences to what people do that lead to the actions that we saw last night. And the police will ensure that those consequences are carried through. I promise you that.
PA. For Chief Constable, there was pressure in the wake of the attack in Southport and the subsequent riots that police should be releasing more information early.
Yeah.
The police did put out a lot of information about the suspect in this case, yet we still saw the events that we saw last night. So moving forward, do you think that will still be the correct approach when it seems to have had little or no effect? And for the Secretary of State, there has been concerns raised about the common travel area, especially for people that have seen the video of that attack. Nature. Questions are inevitably going to be asked here about the asylum vetting process and how someone could come to legally be here who has the proclivity to carry out that level of barbarity and that attack. So how are you going to sort of examine that process to make sure that it's fit for purpose?
If I start with the information issue, so we learned from Southport through reviews that were taken after it occurred that there is a need, there is an expectation that where we have information it should be released. And I am an advocate for transparency, I'm an advocate for candour, people know that from Northern Ireland. When you don't give information out, especially in this toxic online environment, people fill it with misinformation and nonsense.
Yeah.
What we should always do is be honest about what we find, and that's what we did yesterday. And by the way, those communities that were attacked last night, some were from ethnic minority backgrounds, many were not. These idiots didn't just target ethnic minority groups, they just didn't target communities, they targeted Northern Ireland, they targeted society. We have got to stand up to this. We have got to stop this happening. And I just want to remind them of this. We now put the images out of those people involved in this disorder for everyone to see. So we identify them and we prosecute them. We then put their images out when we successfully convict them. Do you want your images out there to reflect the sort of behaviour that we saw last night? I suggest none of them would really want that. So let's stop it. And we will carry on being honest about what we find out in this investigation. That's good, sensible, trusted policing.
To answer your question, well, the police, of course, in questioning the suspect, will be seeking to find out more about him and the circumstances. It doesn't necessarily follow that someone's previous history is going to enable you to know whether they might do something in the future. And therefore it's very hard to see how you can operate a system in those circumstances which attempts to anticipate what somebody might do. And we don't know the full circumstances, but we saw the horrific consequences in the video, the horrific video that was shared online and which has caused such outrage and such public concern. And of course, we must reflect on the circumstances and we must continue to carry on with that strong cooperation between the UK authorities and the Irish authorities in seeking to deal with illegal migration across the common travel area. But the answer is not to say the common travel area is the problem. It has given great benefit to many, many people over a very long period of time, living in Northern Ireland, living in Ireland, living in the rest of the United Kingdom.
Chief Constable, can you talk to me about the nature of the injuries sustained by the two police officers, and do we know that the people that had to flee their homes this night, that any of those people sustained injuries, and Secretary of State. Can you talk to me about your discussion with Minister Hilary in questions that you have heard?
So with regards to police officers, we had one officer who was injured yesterday whilst directing traffic away from one of the pockets of disorder, and he was hit with debris on the head. He's okay. The second officer suffered smoke inhalation when a petrol bomb exploded near him and went under his snood and had to be taken to hospital. You might recall we had 97 police officers injured last year. I again just want to pay tribute to this incredible organisation that I lead. Every day they turn up to do a job that most people could not and would not do. Thankfully last night, with regards to the people that we evacuated from those houses, there were no injuries. Our absolute focus yesterday was to protect life and property, and that's what we achieved. We'll now follow up with going after those who are responsible for those unacceptable scenes last night.
I called Minister McEntee last night because I was keen to brief her on what had happened, given what we now know about how the suspect arrived in Northern Ireland. And obviously there are questions for us, some of which have been asked today, and there will be questions too to the authorities in Ireland about what they know about the individual, because all of that may contribute to the investigation process that is rightly continuing, being led by the Chief Constable and his colleagues.
Belfast Telegraph. Chief Constable, can you tell me, we've seen scenes last night of people going door to door and attacking the homes of migrant families.
Yeah.
What can you do to reassure those people that they will be protected? And also, do you believe that there is any organisation involved, any paramilitary or criminal gangs organising, helping organise this violence? And Secretary of State, can I also say, we're talking about people who have used online platforms to try and advertise these protests and bring people onto the streets. There was also some of your parliamentary colleagues that were involved in distributing some disinformation and misinformation. What would you say to those MPs who are not from Northern Ireland who are exploiting situations such as this?
If I begin with the need to reassure our communities, Alison. So yesterday we had an online meeting with probably around about 140 community leaders. Last night, I think the last call I made to a community leader was at around about midnight. Okay. In the last couple of years, we've built up an incredibly trusting relationship with our ethnic minority communities. One that actually I think is a benchmark for policing. And repeatedly when I speak to those community leaders and I visit those communities, they're repeatedly saying how thankful they are for what the PSNI are doing. Yeah. Last night again, people were saying that the PSNI was saving lives. Now, that's extraordinary, that in the light of the attacks that they're facing, they take the time and have the grace to thank us for what we're doing when they're facing unimaginable intimidation and threats. I will continue to work tirelessly, as will all of my colleagues, to reassure those communities. We've got community meetings tomorrow. I've spoken to community leaders again today, and our local police officers, of which we need many more because of the funding challenges, will be out and about speaking to those communities and reassuring them today. Your question about paramilitarism, we addressed this in the disorder in 2024 and 2025. It's too early for me to say at the moment, but I will not shy away from speaking truth with regards to any involvement of paramilitaries. But let's get the investigation underway to understand who was orchestrating this, both online and in person. And when we've got that investigative information, then through either prosecutions or public statements, we'll reveal it to you.
The fact that people in Northern Ireland are being targeted because of the colour of their skin should sicken every right-thinking citizen of the United Kingdom. And I'm afraid we have seen it before in the disorder in Belfast in 2024, when businesses were targeted because of who owned them and ran them. And we saw that in Ballymena with the disorder last year. The same thing happened. And what does this say about Northern Ireland? People who have come to this country, brought their skills, they're part of the community, they're working. I read a report that one of the families that was forced out of their home has lived here for 20 years. These are our neighbours, our friends, our colleagues at work. It is utterly shameful, and people need to speak out about it. Secondly, there is a particular responsibility on members of Parliament, all of us, because we are leaders of our communities, and I genuinely welcome what so many leaders have said in appealing for calm, but we will be judged by the words that we use. And I would say, because I did comment on it yesterday in the House of Commons, when a reference was made to alien cultures, what was that trying to say? Because what is it saying about people who have come from Sudan? There's probably a surgeon from Sudan operating on someone somewhere in the United Kingdom as we stand here this morning, saving somebody's life. And we have a huge responsibility to think carefully about our language and not to fan the flames of disorder, the kind of disorder that we saw last night. People are absolutely right to be concerned about the terrible attack on Mr. Ogilvy. They have an absolute right to protest peacefully. They have no right to do so much damage to their own communities in Northern Ireland.
The Secretary of State, the Education Authority has said it's up to individual schools whether to close or not. Do you think that's the right approach after last night's arrest? And to the Chief Constable, what are your plans, I know you touched on some of them, to address misinformation circulating online about the suspect for the investigation? And there are migrants who have told us that they have lost trust in the police after last night's arrest. What is your message to those who have lost trust in the service?
I would say that it is obviously for individual schools to take those decisions, depending on the circumstances, how they judge them, what may have happened in their area last night, what may not have happened in their area last night, but of course to take account of any guidance that is given by the authorities, including what the Chief Constable said a moment ago. John.
So your experience isn't my experience, and I'm out in those communities all the time, and they've literally all got my phone number. We've got an incredible strategic engagement team here. This organisation, for the numbers it's got, completely punches above its weight. We have reset our relationship with those communities in the past couple of years. So I would challenge what you said to me. And I want to remind you that, and it was in Ballymena last year that I met a family. In fact, there was a fire officer present who said, you need to know, in fact, the Secretary of State was there when we had this conversation. Your officers saved lives last night.
Absolutely.
And that's what these officers do day and daily. And it's the wider emergency services. Northern Ireland, and I have to say for the people watching this press conference, is an incredible place. It's an place that people should invest in. It's a place people should visit. It's a place, by the way, that's one of the safest places in the United Kingdom. Just think about what we saw last night. But statistically around crime, it's one of the safest places to visit in the United Kingdom. We've got to get that back. And we've got to stop what we saw last night. And that's incumbent on all of us. Okay.
Last question for the time. Chief Constable, you've already mentioned getting mutual aid and your repeated concerns about resources. Can you confirm if PSNI officers have been put on mandatory overtime, how that works? And to the Secretary of State, we saw posters on social media circulating last night, and Tommy Robinson's comments as well, calling for protests in England. How concerned are you that this will spill over into the rest of the UK?
Well, I saw those posters yesterday evening. I am not aware, and I haven't seen any reports in the media of disorder in the rest of the United Kingdom last night, and I very much hope that remains the case. And can I take this opportunity to pay tribute myself personally to the bravery and the diligence and the professionalism and the compassion of the officers of the PSNI, because I know from discussions I've had last time in Ballymena and before that in Belfast, and the officers I met after the bomb attack on Dunmurry police station, the very best of the best. And I would echo what John just said about the role that they have played last night, but previously, in saving people's lives from these thugs who think this is an acceptable way to behave. It isn't. And by these protests, they're putting great pressure on the police officers of Northern Ireland. And what would possess you to attack officers of the police force that has been investigating this terrible crime, has charged a suspect, and is seeking to bring people to justice? Our responsibility, all of us in this community, is to support the police and not to make their job harder.
Thank
John.
you. Thank you, Secretary of State, for those words as well. So, this is a unique policing environment, I often say that. The men and women of the PSNI, mandatory overtime. We can't survive without them doing the hours that they do, well above and beyond what ordinary policing would expect to do. It's a vocational profession, I think, particularly in Northern Ireland. Even those who choose to be in the PSNI, because of the complex history here, have to take a decision that other police officers don't have to take on the island of Ireland or in the wider United Kingdom because of the threat to officers here. They are a very, very special group of people. And recently, some of you will have seen, there's a documentary we've done called Peelers, the PSNI for Real. These are ordinary members of our communities who decide to join the police service here and do an extraordinary job.
Yeah.
And we should celebrate and be thankful for every one of them. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On defence from the party opposite after what they did to the armed forces, and nor are we going to take lectures on the economy, which they crashed and we've had to pick up.
Can be better or not. Come on.
Mr. Speaker, at a time of increased global instability and tension, war in Europe and the Middle East, he is paralysed, giving the armed forces less than half of the minimum that they need. Tony Blair says cut welfare for defence. Lord Robertson, former NATO Secretary General, he's one of them, says cut welfare for defence. We all know why he won't cut welfare. It's because he is too weak. Too weak to make a decision, too weak to face down his backbenchers and cut benefits, too weak to stand up for our national security. As the sun sets on his premiership, he is scrabbling around for a legacy. But isn't it the case, Mr. Speaker, that the real legacy will be a bloated welfare state and a weaker armed forces?
Mr. Speaker, when they were in office, they didn't reform welfare or invest in our armed services. So the very choice she puts up, they did. Defence spending went down. Welfare spending went up £88 billion overall on their watch, 33 billion under the shadow chancellor. So, Mr. Speaker, they did neither welfare reform nor did they spend our armed forces. And every week she reminds us why the British public sent them packing, because she ignores what we're turning the country around. Growth is up. She doesn't want to talk about that. Interest rates are down. She doesn't want to talk about that. Immigration is down after she cheerleaded for it to go up, and the NHS waiting lists have coming down to the fastest rate for 17 years. I'm going to keep fighting for the people who elected a Labour government and sent us here 2 years ago. People who want to live in a safer world. Parents who want to have a better future for their children, and young people growing up in poverty who deserve a better future. We're investing in this great nation, standing up against those that divide us, a stronger, fairer Britain.
There will be a taxi, and it might be for somebody who didn't request it. Richard Burkham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to associate myself with the Prime Minister's comments on the horrific events in Belfast. The co-founder of US tech giant Palantir once claimed the NHS makes people sick, but now Palantir is running the NHS's new data platform. The Financial Times has reported that Palantir staff have had unlimited access to identifiable NHS patient data. And also there's deep concerns about Palantir's human rights record in relation to Trump and ICE and Israel's military action in Gaza. NHS patient data shouldn't be left in the hands of a US tech giant. The government has an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to end this contract through a break clause next year. Will the government take the opportunity and kick Palantir next year out of our NHS?
Mr. Speaker, as the Health Secretary has said, the existing contract will be reviewed, as it always is, ahead of the break clause, and data security is always a priority. On the single patient contract, there will be strong cyber security protections, and we will protect this data, like we do with all health data. We're focused on modernising the NHS so patients don't have to repeat themselves and get the care that they need more quickly. Our investment has cut NHS waiting lists, delivered millions of extra appointments, improved A&E and ambulance response time. I'm proud of what we're doing.
Sir Ed David, Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in sending our condolences to the families of those killed in last week's helicopter crash? And can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's remarks about the horrific knife attack in Belfast? Our thoughts are with the victim and his family. And can I join the Prime Minister in condemning the disorder last night? Mr. Speaker, in Carers Week, can I celebrate the millions of family carers who make huge sacrifices to look after their loved ones? And can I look forward to an England versus Scotland World Cup final? and can I wish you a happy birthday, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, as the chaos over the Defence Investment Plan goes on, I'm sure members on all sides were shocked to read yesterday's reports. The government is considering slashing the hospital programme to fund the shortfall. Surely in 21st century Britain, people can expect both a decent local hospital and armed forces that keep them safe. So will the Prime Minister rule out any cuts to the NHS budget to fund defence?
Mr. Speaker, can I first agree with him about the amazing work of our carers? We will take the necessary measures to defend our country, the first duty of any Prime Minister. We will also take the measures, as we have done, to invest in our public services. And forgive me, I was running a public service when the government that his party were part of was stripping them bare under austerity. So we're really not going to take lectures on austerity from the gentleman opposite.
Well, I was hoping we were going to hear more about defence investment. I would urge the Prime Minister to look at our plans for defence bonds to get £20 billion into defence. But, Mr. Speaker, turning to those horrific scenes in Belfast, too many times we see the same pattern, an appalling crime that makes us all feel immense pain and anger, and then extremists who exploit that grief and anger to spread hatred and violence, aided and abetted by social media barons like Elon Musk and their divisive algorithms. Does the Prime Minister agree this is not who we are as a country, and that it is not free speech if it's controlled by tech billionaires and their algorithms? So will he crack down properly on platforms like X that are fueling violence and hatred?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we will crack down on anyone who's fueling this division. But it is really important, and I agree with him, we are heading into a very difficult situation in Northern Ireland. As I say, I've spoken to the Chief Constable, the First Minister and Deputy First Minister this morning. They are united in saying we should all be calling for calm. The police are on the front line, and it's our duty as politicians to call for that calm, and nobody who's a politician should be whipping up division and hatred.
Speaker, flexible and co-working spaces play an important role in regenerating town centres like mine in Rochester and Strood. They bring more people to our high streets to spend money in our local shops and support our local economies. But recent case law has put this under threat, with valuation office agency assessments now treating many as single larger businesses. And because of this, many small businesses face not only losing their small business rate relief, but also facing potentially backdated bills of up to 3 years, in some cases costing hundreds of thousands of pounds. So will the Prime Minister please ensure that an urgent political solution is found to this problem?
Can I absolutely recognise the important role that flexible working spaces play in regenerating our high streets? Where the law requires a property to be treated as a single unit, the business rates are paid by the operator, not the individual businesses. I can't speak for every case, but I will make sure that the Treasury Minister picks up with her as quickly as possible in relation to the particular issue.
Gavin Robbins.
Mr. Speaker, can I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister in relation to the tragic helicopter crash last week? Mr. Speaker, yesterday I shared my concern that community cohesion stood on the precipice. The North Belfast attack on Monday was medieval, it was sadistic, and it's sadly been viewed by millions in this country. As reprehensible as it was, the outrageous violence, intimidation and community damage carried out last night in my constituency and in other parts of Northern Ireland require the strongest condemnation. It is impossible to share concerns about damage to our British values and then act in a way that tarnishes the very thing we should want to protect. The government's job, our collective job, is to act, to protect our country and to defend our borders. The Prime Minister knows that the man charged entered our country illegally. He passed through 2 safe countries and attained asylum in record time. Will he meet with me urgently to discuss the steps he and his government will take to ensure our values are enforced, that the rule of law in this country sustains, and that he protects and closes the open, porous border between our country and the Irish Republic?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank the Right Honourable Member? And can I particularly thank him and all leaders in Northern Ireland who have urged calm, particularly before what happened last night. I think in standing together with that common message was very powerful. I thank him and others for what they did in that regard. I'm very happy to meet him and other MPs from Northern Ireland as he requests, and I think we've now identified a slot after Prime Minister's questions when we can do that. It is obviously important that we do at the first opportunity. We are all sickened by this attack, but the scenes of violence and disorder have no justification, and we need to be really clear about that. Of course, there are questions that need to be answered, but destroying communities, destroying homes and driving people out of their homes is not and will never be the right way to respond to an attack like this. And I look forward to working with him and others to ensure that we get the calm response and give the police the space that they need to deliver justice.
Russia Nora Ali.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I also associate myself with the Prime Minister's remarks about the horrific situation in Northern Ireland? Mr. Speaker, the Mildmay Hospital in my constituency, established in 1877, has been a pioneer for HIV and AIDS care since the 1980s. Diana, Princess of Wales, made 17 visits to this unique charitable hospital, breaking through the stigma surrounding HIV and AIDS. Today, Mildmay also provides care for patients with other complex needs, relieving pressure on the NHS, and yet it's at risk of closure because of commissioning issues in the NHS. Ahead of the 30th anniversary of Princess Diana's death next year, will the Prime Minister lend his support to this iconic hospital, which was so close to her heart, so that it can survive and thrive?
Minister. Well, can I thank you for raising this? And the Mildmay Hospital is synonymous with extraordinary care and compassion, as she describes. I will make sure that she meets the Health Minister to discuss the concerns that I know she has in relation to it.
Mr. Speaker, as a person of colour in this House, I'm sure members will agree that I cannot be held accountable for the vile acts of individuals that share my complexion or heritage. However, there are some in this chamber who seek division to further their political ambitions. Individuals who are fueling hate against citizens of our own nation and causing hard-working, upstanding people to be afraid for their safety because of the colour of their skin. Teachers, doctors, nurses which are afraid to go to work. Words have consequences, and with eyes of the nation on us in this moment, what pure cold actions will the Prime Minister take against those inciting violence, perpetrating violence, and, more importantly, support the victims following this brutal attack in Belfast?
All those involved in the violence will face the full force of the law, and quite rightly so. He is absolutely right to describe, as he does, the fear that this instills in some of our communities. and that is a very real fear. It is being felt today, this hour, in Northern Ireland by families who are too scared to go about their lawful work, to go to school and to go about their business. That is exactly what it does, which is why we must all condemn it.
Ms. Twist.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The British Standards Institution is 125 years old this year. And I'm proud to have been working closely with them to produce and publish BS 30480, the world's first free standard on suicide in the workplace. The standard has now been downloaded more than 12,500 times. As we all work towards reducing the number of people who die by suicide, will the Prime Minister support more workplace adoption of this standard and work with BSI and myself to achieve this?
Can I start by paying tribute to my honourable friend? She's been an outstanding advocate on this issue. I congratulate the BSI on 125 years of vital work. This guidance reminds us that every part of society has a role to play in suicide prevention, and it is really positive that so many businesses are putting it into practice, and I'm pleased to raise awareness of it and to encourage others who've not seen it yet to look closely at it and follow it.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and happy birthday. We all condemn, of course, the appalling violence in Belfast last night after the horrific attack on Monday. But this Prime Minister is in denial of the rising despair across the country over his failure to stop the boats and related criminality, his failure to recognise two-tier policing, his failures over Manderson, his failures over the scourge of anti-Semitism. He's lost the confidence of the country, his own trade union members and his own very quiet backbenchers, Mr. Speaker. When will he do the right thing, and when will this Prime Minister resign?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, last week we had the terrible case of Henry Novak, which they sought to exploit. Now we have a very difficult situation in Northern Ireland where families and communities are extremely frightened. What do? They try to whip up fear and division, because that's all they've got. And he talks about stopping the boats. Mr. Speaker, when we passed legislation to help stop the boats, what did? They voted against it. And to take those measures, you need money. And he is still not properly addressed why his companies didn't just aggressively avoid tax, but failed to tax the tax that they legally owe. His investment company then gave huge donations to reform. If he paid his tax with more money to deal with these issues.
Ben Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and happy birthday. Last summer, my constituent, Ryan Long, went on his first lads' holiday to Ibiza. On his first night, he made what turned out to be a fatal decision when he took an ecstasy pill and, after falling into a coma, sadly passed away at the age of 18. Since his death, his mum, Angie, working with local charity Open Road, has ploughed her grief into campaigning, fundraising and raising awareness of the dangers of drug use so that no other family has to go through the pain hers has suffered. She joins us in the public gallery today. Will the Prime Minister join me in thanking Angie for her dedicated work, and will he meet with her to discuss ways we can further raise awareness of the danger of drugs in Ryan's name?
Minister. Can I thank him for raising this case? And I think the details of Ryan's case that he has outlined are very hard to hear. I have to say, as a father of a 17-year-old boy, I find it particularly hard to hear. And no mother, should have to experience what Angie has experienced. I know she's here with us today, and I'm very much hoping I can meet her immediately after PMQs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If any member of the public wishes to visit a major sporting event or major music event, they can expect to be searched on the way in. If they bring a bottle of water, the lid will be taken. If they order a drink from the bar, it will be served in a plastic cup. This is done for security reasons. Yet because of exemptions in the Offensive Weapons Act 2019, those same events permit the carrying of blades up to 5 inches long. I would just like to ask the Prime Minister,
Does he recognise the dangers and the risks associated with that? And does he recognise what a solicitor might call an exception, our voters would call two-tier justice? Yeah.
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me just be very clear. Any blade that's used to threaten or to harm others is illegal by law. Any blade. We will, of course, work with the Sikh community, knife crime campaigners and the police to learn the right lessons. That is the responsible thing to do. And I really do think we all have a responsibility, a duty as politicians, to respond to the case that we were discussing last week and the events in Northern Ireland that we're discussing today with the calmness that leadership requires.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Maternity care in North Oxfordshire declined under the previous government, with the loss of consultant-led services at the Horton Hospital, where I was born, and serious failings by the Trust, which are now part of Baroness Amos' inquiry. However, last week, the Care Quality Commission upgraded the Horton Maternity Unit to good. Will the Prime Minister visit the Horton Hospital in Banbury to see the change that this government's £3.3 million investment into that hospital has delivered since July 2024?
Well, I'm pleased that his local maternity services are seeing improvements. We now have a record number of midwives working in the NHS, and we're investing over £150 million to address critical safety risks. There is much more that we need to do, so every mother is listened to and receives outstanding care. The recommendations of the Amos inquiry will be published shortly, and we will act to deliver lasting change.
Tom Gordon. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this year, I found myself in hospital as a result of a flare-up from living with ulcerative colitis. I was bowled away by the support of our local constituents and people who live with inflammatory bowel disease across the country when they got in touch and shared their support. But for people with IBD, care often falls far short of the mark. It can take ages to get a diagnosis. Myself, it took the best part of a decade. And then when you manage to get a diagnosis, the care that comes can come as a postcode lottery. Now, when you're living with a fluctuating and not visible condition, that's already hard enough before navigating those systems. IBD UK Alliance set out what good care looks like with the IBD standard. Will the Prime Minister meet with me and clinicians to discuss IBD standards, and will he consider appointing a national clinical lead to drive improvement when it comes to IBD care?
Well, can I thank him for sharing his personal experience and congratulating him on his achievements at the London Marathon, notwithstanding that. I agree with him that wherever a patient lives, they should receive high-quality, consistent care. Through national improvement programmes like Getting It Right First Time, we are making sure the best practice is shared to drive up standards, but I'm very happy for ministers to give him the details of that in the way that he's raised in his question.
Chris Vance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and many happy returns to you. And can I take this opportunity, as it is Carers Week, to thank all of the young carers and young adult carers in my constituency of Harlow for all they do all year round. Mr. Speaker, you will know, as a former teacher, I spend a lot of time talking to students, parents and teachers in my constituency of Harlow about the dangers of social media, and they're very concerned that these big tech companies are not taking their responsibility seriously. So can I ask the Prime Minister what he's doing to hold these big tech firms to account to ensure our young people are safe online?
Can I thank him for the great work he's done for decades supporting young carers? Mr. Speaker, we've given tech companies a deadline. Introduce the device-level controls that already exist to prevent children from sending and receiving sexually explicit images, or we will change the law with fines for companies or even criminal liability for bosses who fail to comply. Because when it comes to the safety of our children, standing by is not an option, and further steps will follow.
Adrian Ramsey.
Mr. Speaker, a suppressed DEFRA report concluded that without transformational change, our food and water systems are at risk of catastrophic failure from 2030. Another suppressed Joint Intelligence Committee report concluded that there's a high likelihood of ecosystem collapse, putting food production at risk. Does the Prime Minister recognise that many of us across this House are ready to work collaboratively to address these very urgent challenges? And will he commit to publishing these two reports in full?
Prime Minister.
Well, I agree that we must act to protect ecosystems that underpin our food supply and our way of life. And I'm really proud that under this government, the UK is back playing a leading part on climate change and restoring nature.
And there we will leave Prime Minister's questions for this week, but we will keep an eye on what is left and bring you...
Thousands of pounds were spent on luxury items ranging from a salt and pepper grinder to a new Jaguar to a luxury motorhome. When party figures raised concerns, even resigned, they were silenced and ostracised by those at the very top of the SNP. Does my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, agree that a full investigation into this national scandal needs to be held as a matter of urgency?
Well, Mr. Speaker, these are clearly serious, legitimate questions that deserve answers and scrutiny. Answers and scrutiny they're not getting. I do think the Scottish Parliament should look at them closely, and I hope they'll listen to the concerns of this House.
Anna Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Running a business as a plumber, I was well used to dealing with dirty grubbiness. And there's still plenty of that dirty grubbiness behind me. Now, running a business is tough, so will the Prime Minister join me in backing That's the Problem campaign to cut VAT rates in hospitality? He didn't answer the question last week. Will he tell us today, yes or no?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very glad that we're cutting VAT over the summer with our summer savings programme that I hope she will support. I do note we haven't heard much from the Green Party leader after he admitted he hadn't paid his council tax. Perhaps he's traded his houseboat for a submarine.
Paul Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ICBs have a statutory obligation to fully fund all essential medicines and pharmacy provision for the delivery of specialist end-of-life and palliative care at our wonderful hospices, such as St Catherine's and Derrien House, situated in our respective constituencies of South Ribble and Chorley. However, this is not happening, as ICBs are claiming the costs are covered by the hospice's core grant. Would the Prime Minister support my private member's bill, St Catherine's Law, that seeks to place an explicit obligation on every ICB to fund all essential medicines and pharmacy provision for all our hospices separately from any core grant they receive from the NHS?
Can I thank him for raising this? And as he knows, integrated care boards are responsible for commissioning palliative care and end-of-life services, including hospices, to meet the needs of their area. And that includes decisions on how services are funded, including medicines and pharmacy provisions. I'm happy to talk to him further about it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every time there is heavy rain, Judy Washington's driveway and garden is flooded with raw sewage. The same happens to her neighbour, and it happened last week again. Thames Water have told my office they won't even look at the situation until the end of winter 2027. It is unacceptable that a lady in her retirement is shovelling sewage from her drive and waiting for human waste to decompose in her garden. Will the Prime Minister write to Thames Water on Judy and her neighbours' behalf to compel them to sort this out?
Well, can I thank him for raising this case? And it's obviously awful. If he will share further details of it with my office, I'll make sure the Water Minister picks it up and acts as quickly as possible.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the Prime Minister warned that NATO needs to be ready for an attack by 2030 from Russia. Indeed, we have an increasingly belligerent, expansionist, imperialist Russian leadership to our east and a Donald Trump US leadership to our west, for whom Ukraine and European security is not a priority. So we need to meet the moment. To his credit, since taking power, the Prime Minister has increased defence spending, but the House of Commons Defence Committee is adamant that we need to reach 3% GDP spend on defence. So when the Prime Minister is signing off on decisions within the Defence Investment Plan, which I hope will be, touch wood, imminently published, will he agree to that 3% GDP spend on defence?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, he's right to raise the concerns that we have. We've increased defence spending, and the Defence Investment Plan is going to be set out very soon and before the NATO summit, which, as he knows, in just a few weeks' time.
Final question, Alicia Katz.
Mr. Speaker, Lindsay Foreman has not eaten in 32 days, and her husband Craig in 23. They are being held hostage by the terrorist government of Iran, but this government's weak words have abandoned them.
So will the Prime Minister stop raising their case and start fighting for them? And he can do that by declaring today in this House that they are arbitrarily detained, something he has refused to do, and refer their case to the International Court of Justice so we get them home.
Prime Minister.
Can I thank her for raising this important case and give her the assurance and the House the assurance that this is raised regularly with us. The Foreign Secretary has raised it very recently. We raise it every time we can. We do everything we can in relation to this case. And we are doing everything that we can, as she would expect, as the party opposite would have done in office. And she's right to raise the case.
Let the front benches change over. That completes Pleb's questions. Question, Claire Hammond.
Thank you. It's been a depressing and horrific 2 days in Belfast. Thank you. Question one. To ask the
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for the opportunity to respond to this question, which I am answering on behalf of my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, who this morning met with the Chief Constable of the Police Service of Northern Ireland to receive an update on the situation there. Let me start by saying that my thoughts, as I'm sure the thoughts of the whole House, remain with the victim of the horrifying knife attack in North Belfast earlier this week and with his family. The House will be aware that a man has been charged in relation to that incident, and I can confirm that he is a 30-year-old Sudanese national who received refugee status in 2023 and was granted 5 years leave to remain. Now, we must now allow justice to take its course. The attack on Monday evening has understandably caused anger and profound concern. However, there is a line between concern and disorder, and we must never allow it to be crossed. So, let me be absolutely clear, Mr. Speaker. There is no excuse for the disgraceful scenes of violence and disorder that occurred in Northern Ireland last night. Houses and vehicles were set on fire, placing lives at risk, terrifying law-abiding citizens and forcing residents to flee their homes. Reports that ethnic minorities were targeted are sickening. Now, Mr. Speaker, I would like to pay tribute to the police and the other emergency services for their work last night. Faced with an extraordinarily challenging situation, they responded with great courage, and they are owed our thanks. Our message to those responsible for last night's disorder is altogether different. To them, we say this: you will be caught, and you will face the consequences of your actions. As of this morning, there had been 3 arrests, but more will surely follow. To those considering joining further disorder, my message is clear: do not do it. You will be held accountable for your actions. You will feel the full face of the law. Policing is, as members are aware, a devolved matter, but the Home Office is, of course, monitoring the situation very closely, and we are working with operational partners to understand and act on any implications for public order across the United Kingdom. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I recognise that tensions are running high. At times like this, there is even more onus on us all as the custodians of our democracy to respond with unity, to choose our words and actions with care, and to uphold the first duty of the state, maintaining order on the streets and keeping the public safe. because the shameful scenes that we saw last night are not who we are, and they never will be.
Claire Hammer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It has been a shocking 2 days in Northern Ireland. The horrific knife attack in North Belfast has left a man fighting for his life and an entire community distressed by what they've seen. Justice must, of course, take its course and deliver for that victim whose family have asked for calm. But last night brought further outrage. Children in my constituency and others lifted out of their beds as their homes burned. Masked men roamed the streets, going door to door, menacing and setting fire to cars and buses and homes, terrorising people on the basis of the colour of their skin or the sound of their voice. People from Sudan, people from India, people from Ukraine and people from Belfast. And today, businesses are shuttered. Medical appointments are cancelled. Schools are being closed for fear of getting young people home. So many people are frightened to walk the streets and frightened to be in their own homes tonight. And for all the online agitators who stoke this stuff up, when they move on to their next target, we'll be the ones left to pick up the pieces. People are, of course, entitled to their views on immigration, and of course government policy isn't perfect, but this hasn't been a debate or a conversation. There haven't been proposals, there haven't been honesty about the trade-offs, there has been mob justice and some of the same old proposals for a hardened border on the island of Ireland. Political leaders have a duty to lead, not to lean into people's worst fears and anxieties. That video of the awful crime in North Belfast was unusual in its brutality, but the cycle of deflection and disorder has not been unusual. We have seen this movie too many times before. In Belfast, we know all about blaming an entire community for the actions of others. We know all about scapegoating, we know all about tit-for-tat violence, and we know all about street justice. Violence creates division, it's affecting our economy, and it's undermining the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland who want to work together to build a better future. What support will the government provide to those who have been harmed by this awful violence? Can they ensure swift justice for all of the perpetrators of the last few days? And what will they do to bring to heel the online platforms who drive this madness?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the Honourable Lady has described with great clarity the impact of the scenes that we've seen in Northern Ireland over the past number of hours. And let me be absolutely clear, the scenes of disorder we witnessed in parts of Northern Ireland last night are not only damaging communities, but they are quite literally putting lives at risk. Like her, I utterly condemn the attacks on property and vehicles and the other related violence that we've seen. There is no justification at all for this type of thuggery, and there is no place for it in Northern Ireland or anywhere else for that matter. Now, I know that she will agree that it is now vital that the Police Service of Northern Ireland are given the time, the space and the full support that they need to continue with their investigation. The rule of law must and will prevail, and justice must and will be served. Violence is never a justified response, and this disorder only causes pain and suffering for those living in the area, as the Honourable Lady has very eloquently described. Now, those involved do need to take a step back and consider the consequences of their actions, and I would strongly urge anyone who has information, no matter how small it might seem, to come forward and to contact the PSNI urgently in order to assist them with their inquiries. The Honourable Member specifically asked about what support is being offered. She will know and understand that the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland is in Belfast today, and I know that he will be working with colleagues over there to make sure that they have the support and the resources that they need to deal with this very troubling situation.
Chris Phillips, Shadow Home Secretary.
Monday night's attack was disgusting and barbaric. The victim suffered serious injuries to his neck and lost an eye. The thoughts of the whole house, I'm sure, are with him. I thank the police and emergency services for responding and pay tribute to members of the public who so bravely intervened. I commend the police for confirming the suspect's identity swiftly, because full transparency in these cases is vital. Can the Minister confirm PSNI will have all the resources needed to deal with these issues? We've all seen the footage of the appalling attack featuring a Sudanese illegal immigrant. But let me be clear, violence of any kind in protest is never justified. Innocent people should never be targeted, and nobody should ever set fire to houses or cars. Speaking as a father, no one should ever feel unsafe in their homes. The police, I hope, will bring the perpetrators swiftly to justice. I do understand, though, why people are angry. The suspect came into the UK illegally. He should never have been here in the first place. Mainstream politicians must now understand how angry the public are about mass illegal immigration. If mainstream politics does not stop this, the public will turn elsewhere. Since the election, 73,000 people have entered the country illegally via small boat, mostly young men. Many have committed serious crimes. I recently met the mother of Rhiannon White, a young woman brutally murdered by a Sudanese small boat migrant. There have been multiple rapes and sexual assaults, with victims as young as just 13. I've come over time to realise there is ultimately only one way to end illegal immigration: by leaving the ECHR so we can deport all illegal migrants on arrival. Then illegal migration will stop, and these appalling crimes with it.
Minister.
Well, I'm grateful to the Shadow Home Secretary for the points that he have raised, and particularly for the clarity with which he made the point about violence never being justified. He's absolutely right, and I hope that we can speak with a strong sense of unity about that. He specifically asked about ensuring that PSNI have the resources that they need to do the difficult work that they're being asked to do at this particular moment. I know that he understands that, of course, policing is devolved, but the Secretary of State, as I said a moment ago, is in Northern Ireland this morning to work out what more we can do to provide support and to make sure that the PSNI have got the resources that they need. He spoke about the anger that people feel, and that is absolutely understood. I'm sure all honourable and right honourable members will have seen the footage that is circulating online, and whilst clearly I have to be incredibly careful not to get in the way of a live investigation, it is understandable why people will feel extremely angry at what they've seen. But it is very important that that anger does not tip over into criminality, to the kind of thuggish behaviour that we've seen. Now, he rightly raised concerns about the importance of making sure that this government, as with any government, has the right framework in place to deport those foreign national offenders who come here and commit criminality. I mean, I think he is aware of the figures. There have been 67,000 deportations and removals under this government, which marks a significant increase. I hope he and the House recognises the seriousness and the urgency with which we take these matters. They need to be dealt with calmly and effectively, but this government will do everything that we can, everything in our powers, and if there are further powers required, we will make sure that we have them, to deport and remove those people who raise a threat to the public.
On the answer,
Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to congratulate my friend, the Honourable Member for Belfast South and Mid-Down, on securing her urgent question. And I also would like to pay tribute to the Chief Constable and the PSNI and the emergency services for their work, and their bravery continues to be unstinted. Does the Minister agree that the events we witnessed last night demonstrate the importance of political leaders speaking with one voice in condemning violence, rejecting extremism and supporting those working to build a shared and prosperous future for all communities and the people in Northern Ireland?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful to her, not least because I know that she has a very long-standing interest in Northern Ireland. She's absolutely right to highlight the bravery of the police. I've spent a lot of time in Northern Ireland over the years and have something of a sense of the importance of the work that they do and the risk that they carried. And looking at the scenes that unfolded last night, it is impossible not to conclude that the police did an incredibly good job under very difficult circumstances, and I absolutely pay tribute to them and their service, and of course their families, who will have been at home sick to death with worry at the kind of risk and threat that their loved ones were having to deal with. She's right to raise the importance of responsibility. As political leaders, as members of this House and further afield, we should all understand that words have consequences. And at moments like this, whilst I understand the temptation for some to score cheap political points, I think what the public expect is all of us to rise above that and think about how we can stand together and address these problems that we undoubtedly face.
Paul Kohler, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My thoughts, as the thoughts of the whole House, are with Stephen Ogilvie, who suffered truly horrific injuries on Monday night, and with the residents of Belfast forced to flee by rioters who do not speak for any legitimate community grievance. The knife attack was repugnant, but so too were the scenes that followed. This is the second consecutive summer of racially motivated disorder in Northern Ireland, which the PSNI has faced while understaffed and underfunded. Now, the Minister rightly says the PSNI should be given time and space, but will he confirm what additional financial support the government will provide the PSNI, because they need it? Whilst the alleged attacker had leave to remain, concerns about irregular migration across the Northern Ireland border are being exploited by right-wing extremists to prevent hatred and division. Given the importance of accurate information, can the Minister also confirm whether the government will begin collecting data on such crossings, as officials were unable to provide it when I recently raised the issue as a member of the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee?
Well, I'm grateful to him for the sensible way in which he's brought his points forward. He's right to raise points with regard to the resourcing of PSNI. The government absolutely recognises the financial pressures that PSNI faces. As he will understand, policing is largely a devolved matter in Northern Ireland, but in recognition of the security situation in Northern Ireland, the government is providing PSNI with £37.8 million in additional security funding for each financial year until 28-29. And as I've said, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland is there with the Chief Constable, John Boutcher, this morning. And I'm certain that they will be having conversations about whether there is more that we can do to provide support. He also, I think, made some entirely reasonable points, including around transparency. And I agree with the points that he's making. It's important always that there is transparency in this case and in all cases, but I know that he will understand that I'm very limited in terms of what more I can say because of the ongoing live police investigation.
And I'm joking.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I thank my friend from South Belfast Mid-Down for her question and to the Minister for his answers. And of course I think about the victim of the grotesque knife attack early this week. Now, Mr. Speaker, Northern Ireland is a wonderful place with wonderful people, and the scenes on the streets of Belfast that we saw were utterly disgraceful and do not reflect the Northern Ireland that I know, that I love, and that many of my family live in. I'm particularly concerned about the young people who've had to bear witness to the violence and disorder, as generations of young people in Northern Ireland have too. So can I ask the Minister what support will be given to the Northern Ireland Executive to ensure that the young people of Northern Ireland are protected, supported and shielded from the disgraceful impacts of the criminality we saw in Belfast last night?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to him. I think he makes an important wider point, which is those of us in this House who don't represent constituencies in Northern Ireland, many of us will have a long-standing affection and knowledge of the place. And I first went there in 1998 and have been a regular visitor ever since. I think it is an extraordinary part of the United Kingdom. It is a place that has been on something of a journey over the years. And when I was in Northern Ireland just recently, I was incredibly impressed with that journey and the progress that has been made in recent times. And I think we have a shared endeavour across government and across this House to ensure that that journey continues in a positive direction. Key to that is the point that he made about young people in Northern Ireland, and we have an absolute shared responsibility to them to make sure that they can enjoy the brightest possible future. And I know that that will be an absolute priority for the Secretary of State and for other colleagues right across government.
Chair of the Home Affairs Committee, Dame Karen Bradley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And can I join others in paying tribute to the Police Service of Northern Ireland, who have once again acted without fear or favour and walked bravely into some of the most dangerous situations. But following on from the previous question about young people, I was struck by just how many young people were involved in the disorder yesterday, incited both by what they've seen on social media, but also by those gangmasters who have groomed those young people into committing violence day in, day out across Northern Ireland. So can I ask the Minister if the Home Office would look into a review of the treatment of young people in Northern Ireland and the way that so many of them have been groomed? In effect, it's modern slavery.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Lady, who I think makes a really important point. And yes, I absolutely give her that commitment that working with colleagues in the Northern Ireland office, we will do that. Like her, I was struck with the presence of young people taking part in this criminality in Northern Ireland. We've seen that before in the bad old days of the Troubles, and we must never go back to that. I think there are some specific points that we're looking at around the extent to which any of this criminality and disorder has been directed by paramilitary groups in Northern Ireland, but not yet in a position to say more about that. She may well be aware that the UK government provides 50% of funding for a programme that's specifically designed to tackle paramilitary activity and organised crime. Currently, that's £8 million of investment that goes into that. But I absolutely accept and agree with her key point that we've got to make sure that young people in Northern Ireland are diverted from paths of criminality, and that is a matter that I will take up with colleagues in the Home Office and also with the Secretary of State.
Joe White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the honourable member for her question? We have people in this House and beyond, including currently from Moscow, whipping up hate and disorder in our country. And what happened last night in Northern Ireland is a sickening example of that. Children nearly died. Mr. Speaker, all of us in this House agree that we must secure our borders. Would the Minister agree with my proposal that the sight of people arriving here by boat or crossing from Ireland can be ended by processing asylum claims at the nearest point of safety, thousands of miles away, and thus bringing an end to the trade of people smuggling?
Mr. Speaker, well, in terms of the Honourable Lady's first point, she's right in the sense that there will, very concerningly, always be malign actors seeking to whip up community tensions through the use of mis- and disinformation, and we are acutely alive to that, and we will work with partners and law enforcement to make sure that we are on top of all of that. In terms of her second point, I'm joined on the front bench by my ministerial colleague from the Home Office, and I know that he will have listened carefully to what she has had to say, but I'm sure she understands the determination that exists within the department and right across government to tackle the small boat crossings. That is something that we are working at pace to address.
Sammy Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Minister's right that those who were engaged in the violence last night should face the full weight of the law, because legally, morally and politically they were wrong. However, if the law is going to apply to those who protested, it should also be applied to those who have broken into our country illegally, have broken our immigration laws, and are then become the source of many of the problems which we face. But instead, they're taken by the hand. They have state resources spent on them. They have got accommodation made available to them. And then they're given the right to stay here, even though they've come in illegally. And if this issue is to be addressed, then the government must change its attitude. Those who come into our country illegally should be told, you will never get asylum. And the Irish government should be spoken to as well, so that the Irish Republic does not become the conduit for illegal immigration, the route which was used by the person who has now been accused of this crime.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course, the law should always be applied without fear or favour. And whilst acknowledging the points that he has made, I hope that he understands the determination of this government to address the issues that he has raised. The government has been crystal clear about our commitment to reduce to zero the number of hotels that are being used to accommodate asylum seekers. There is a commitment to do that process in a different way, but through the use of larger sites. And also, he will have heard the remarks I made earlier about the increase in the removal of foreign national offenders. So this is a priority for this government, this is a priority for the Home Secretary, and we are working at pace to address the issues that the Honourable Member raises.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The attack on Monday night in Belfast was horrific, and the scenes last night terrifying. It is understandable that people are seeking answers, and that yet again another horrific crime is facing public scrutiny and political debate. One of the challenges is that right now people are finding those answers online and in that toxic world of social media. Now, we can either feed that tension it is creating, or we can dispel it by standing together against those who wish to target entire communities and being committed to replacing the fictions with fact. I know the Home Secretary and the Minister have been looking at this issue. What more can we do to help people have access to trusted sources of information when it comes to difficult issues like this, so that we can challenge those people who spread hatred, leading from this place and delivering to those communities affected the information they need to be able to help heal themselves and deal with the trauma of what they've seen?
Well, I think the Honourable Member raises a very important point. I think there will be agreement and recognition that activity online can provide extraordinary opportunities and benefits, but clearly it can also provide a toxic environment which drives the kind of criminality that we've seen in recent times. I hope that she will understand that the government is working at pace across government through the Defending Democracy Task Force and working with colleagues in DCIT, DCMS and right across law enforcement and with operational partners to make sure that activity online is monitored in a way that will best enable us to reduce and eliminate the kind of activity that she refers to. She will understand that that is not an easy thing to do, and we are constantly looking for greater responsibilities to be exercised by the social media companies and by the tech companies. But I give her an assurance of the importance that we attach to these matters. I've had meetings recently with ministerial colleagues to look at what more we can do, so I assure her that we're looking carefully at what more we can do.
Sir Julian.
Does the Security Minister share my concern that irrespective of the personal motivation of this perpetrator, the circumstances by which he came into this country sends a signal to those ideological movements abroad that wish us harm, that there is a very easy back door by which they can infiltrate this country. And if an operation of that sort is mounted in the future, what sort of violent response will there be to a spectacular terrorist attack that could and should have been prevented by secure borders?
Well, the Right Honourable Gentleman, as he always does, has raised a very thoughtful series of questions, and whilst I know that he will understand, I'm not going to get into the detail of the potential motivations of the alleged offender in these particular circumstances. I think the general challenge that he raises is the right one. It's the job of this government, of any government, to ensure that the United Kingdom is the hardest possible target for our adversaries and for those who would do us harm. Now, from his previous service on the ISC, he knows a lot about the nature and the range of threats that as a country we face. I hope that he also knows that this government, like the last government, does everything it possibly can to make sure that where there are particular points of vulnerability, we are bearing down on those and that we have the right capabilities, the right resources in place to ensure that we keep the public safe. There is no more important duty of any government than being able to do that. And that is what myself as the Security Minister, working with my colleagues across government, spend each hour of every day making sure that we do.
Mr Speaker, the crime committed was horrific and the violence in response has been appalling. And many of my constituents are deeply concerned at seeing what looks like a racially motivated attacks on families. They are feeling more scared in my community. So can I seek reassurances from the Minister that we will continue to stand together to reject extremism and violence and support those who work together to continue to maintain a safe, tolerant and united community both in Northern Ireland and across the United Kingdom?
Well, Mr Speaker, I absolutely can provide those assurances. The Honourable Lady is absolutely right to make the points that she does it in the way that she does. It's at moments like this where we are collectively tested, and the test is whether we are prepared to stand together against the kind of horrific violence that we've seen, both in terms of the initial attack and the response to it, and whether we are prepared to stand together and reject extremism. That isn't about seeking to in any way minimise the horror of the scenes that we've seen. But the job of government is to provide a grown-up, balanced response that seeks to bring communities together, not drive them apart. and that will always be the response of this government.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Happy birthday to you. The Minister said to criminals, who are criminals, Minister, not thugs, do not do it. With respect, that won't cut it. It suggests that the government is simply a passive, pearl-clutching observer rather than an active participant in this. Whilst I accept that operational matters are matter for the PSNI and not for the Minister, will he say what the government is doing to try to fix the fundamentals that underpin this dreadful situation in Belfast?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've got a huge amount of respect for the right honourable gentleman, but I think his characterisation of the words that I used in my opening remarks is unfair, not least because I was seeking to provide a degree of clarity to those in Northern Ireland who might find themselves swept along by some of the violence that we've seen in recent times. I think it is entirely reasonable that as a government minister there is a clarity about the message that I send to those people, which is they shouldn't do it, and if they do decide that they want to do it, then they have to be prepared to face the full consequences of their criminality. Now, I think, with great respect to him, I think that is not an unreasonable point to make. His second point was a kind of sort of wider systemic point. I know that he will understand that the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland is an extraordinarily seasoned political operator who dedicates his service in this House to serving the people of Northern Ireland as the Secretary of State. And I know that honourable members right across the House will understand how seriously he takes these matters. But the honourable gentleman is also right to infer that this is a shared endeavour across government. And that's why we will make sure that we will look carefully at what's happened in Northern Ireland and ensure that our collective response is proportionate.
Lawrence Turner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I commend the Honourable Member for South Belfast and Mid Down for her words in this place. My constituents in Birmingham Northfield will have been horrified by last night's scenes in Belfast, just as they will have been by the attacks on police in Southampton. Both followed horrifying individual incidents which were subsequently exploited for extremist political ends, including online, as she said. The only difference between shouting something through a megaphone and posting it on social media is the latter might reach millions. So what consequences will be faced by those who do meet the threshold for encouraging acts of criminality, including online?
Well, I'm grateful to him, and I think he's also right to raise concerns about the disturbances and the disorder that we saw in Southampton recently. The scenes both in Southampton and Belfast, and of course we've seen them in other parts of the United Kingdom, are utterly abhorrent. It is extremely kind of ridiculous for those people who participate in that kind of criminality to sometimes describe themselves as being patriots. They're not patriots. They don't believe in our country. They want to undermine our country. The real patriots are those people in the police force dealing with this disorder, dealing with this criminality. And to come to his second point, I can absolutely give him an assurance that those who do decide that they want to engage in this violent criminal disorder will face the full weight of the law.
Gavin Robinson.
I'm extremely grateful to you and to the Minister for his condemnation and to the member for Belfast South and Mid Down for securing another opportunity to raise these important issues. The condemnation has been strong and the condemnation has been appropriate from the Minister. He is also right to highlight that you cannot protect British values whilst tarnishing them and trampling upon them and destroying the rule of law and intimidating members of our community and putting them out of their homes and destroying their lives. That's not British, and that's not what we need in our country. But as Security Minister, he has a number of responsibilities, and I would urge him to have a look at the swift processes that were deployed 3 years ago on asylum applications. I understand that an individual in question was most likely not even interviewed as part of that asylum process, given the constrained timescales within it. That individuals just give a name and a date of birth, and there's no database upon which to confirm that the name and the date of birth that they gave is true. And without making any comment on the individual in question on Monday, that is a huge loophole in the security of our nation. There is a need to engage with the Government of the Republic of Ireland and ensure that we have uniformity and uniformity of protection of our borders. And I would ask him to commit to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very grateful to the right honourable gentleman, and I thought he made excellent points at the beginning of his remarks with regard to the activities we've seen and them not being British. I completely agree with his analysis of the situation, and I hope that he acknowledges my very long-standing interest and affection for his part of the United Kingdom, and lots of right honourable and honourable members feel a huge sense of determination to support him and his colleagues in the important work that they are doing. He raised a number of other points, and I know that he will understand that I'm joined by my ministerial colleague who is listening very carefully to the points that he has made. Of course, when a situation such as the one we've seen in recent days occurs, the department will want to look very carefully at the circumstances of that particular case. In general terms, some of the metrics relating to some of the points that he has made are absolutely heading in the right direction, not least in terms of initial decisions on asylum being up by 71%, and the government's absolute determination to make sure that we're processing claims much more quickly and much more effectively than was the case previously. But I think the right honourable gentleman makes a whole series of points. We will consider them further, and of course, should he wish to discuss them, I'd be very happy to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I echo the remarks in the statement from the Minister and also my friend, the member for Belfast South and Mid Down, who spoke with so well and with such clarity. This was a horrific attack, and I'd like to join others in extending my sympathies with the victim. I'd also like to commend the bravery of Matt McKinnon and those who ran towards danger to disarm the attacker, and the PSNI and emergency services for their swift response. But can I also say it was disappointing, but not surprising, to see the usual suspects using this as an opportunity to divide and point score and help to whip up violence and disorder online, which then plays out on the streets of Belfast. Will he join me in condemning those who have done so, and does he agree this demonstrates the need for urgent action against the online platforms that facilitate and spread this hate?
Well, I'm very grateful to him, not least because I know that he also has a very long-standing affection for Northern Ireland, and I completely join with him in praising the bravery of all of those involved a couple of nights ago in terms of the actions that we saw. I think he's also right to raise very significant concerns, and it links to the point that I made earlier on about words having consequences. Whilst there will be, as he describes them, the usual suspects coming forward to try and derive some kind of political advantage from circumstances such as this, I genuinely believe that the majority of the public expect us to act in a sensible, consensual way to address the problems about which people are rightly angry, but to do that in a way that brings people together, not drive them apart.
Mr. Speaker, in my 25 years as a Member of Parliament, I never thought I would ever see a situation where masked men would go door to door seeking to drive families from ethnic minorities out of their home. Now, what happened on Monday was truly barbaric, but there is nothing in the world that would ever justify that type of behaviour. Now, I and others in this House have been warning about the rise of the far right and those pernicious people who would influence this type of behaviour on our streets. Will he now acknowledge that we have a new emerging problem with elements of the far right? Will he acknowledge that? And will he therefore then commit to ensure that we tackle it effectively?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I agree with the honourable member. The scenes that he described were utterly abhorrent and were not the scenes that any right-minded person would ever want to see anywhere, in Belfast or the United Kingdom or anywhere. And I hope that there is a shared sense of agreement about that. In terms of his second point, of course I acknowledge, as the Security Minister, that in order to keep our country safe, we have to deal with a range of different threats that sit across the spectrum. Of course, that includes extreme right-wing activity, as it includes a range of other specific threats. In truth, my approach is always to be ideologically agnostic, in the sense that it doesn't make a difference to me what the particular motivation or the ideology of those who would do us harm is. I will make sure that we've got the defences to stand against those threats, regardless of where they come from.
Alex Houston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I want to take the opportunity to condemn the appalling assault on the gentleman on Monday night and to praise the members of the public, the PSNI and emergency services for stepping in and trying to help that individual. I would also like to put on the record that I condemn the violence that took place last night. There is no place for violence in our society, no matter what the issue. It is just wrong. However, Minister, I do have some issues. We've raised issues about police resources for the PSNI. It's not a matter that the PSNI might need resources, they urgently need help and support. We are over 1,000 police officers down in Northern Ireland, and I would urge you to send support as quickly as possible. We also have, Minister, the problem of an open border, and I know the member for South Belfast has mentioned that. That is a back door for illegal immigration into Northern Ireland. Would the Minister be able to provide us with figures how many people are using that back door and what plans the government are going to do to close that? And finally, many decent law-abiding people have genuine concerns about illegal immigration, and they feel that this government and politicians are letting them down. What can the Minister do and government do to try and assure those people that their genuine concerns are being taken seriously and are going to be resolved? Thank you.
I'm grateful to him for his condemnation of the violence and the words that he said in praise of those who've acted with great courage. I understand the points that he makes about PSNI resources. These are matters that I have twice previously discussed with the Chief Constable in Northern Ireland, and I'm quite certain that my Right Honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, will be having further conversations with the Chief Constable today and on an ongoing basis. I do recognise the concerns that he's raised, and I know that the Secretary of State and colleagues across government will want to reflect on them further in light of recent events. I thought he also made an important point about the common travel area. The common travel area, as he will know, is without border controls, and this has been the case for many years. So currently this is not data that can be collected. However, we do have immigration enforcement teams who conduct intelligence-led raids, and we have a new data sharing agreement between the UK government, local authorities and PSNI to protect the CTA from abuse. But we'll look very carefully at the points that he has raised, and I know that there will be further colleagues with ministerial colleagues about them.
Of course, rioting is utterly wrong, and the scenes we saw in Belfast yesterday deserve our total condemnation. But law-abiding people across the country are rightly furious at the failure of the government to stop dangerous and violent men entering our country illegally. One reason is the pull factor of our asylum and welfare system. The other factor is the open border that we have with the Republic. And I stood on that border last week, Mr. Speaker, and of course nobody wants to see physical infrastructure erected there. But what conversations is the Minister having with the Irish government to get them to do more to stop illegal migrants travelling north into the UK?
Well, I am grateful for the condemnation of the violent behaviour that we saw. I think it's right that we all do that, of course, and don't allow any ambiguity in terms of the words that we use in that regard. He'll understand that I don't share the particular critique that he's offered of the government in recent times, not least because the number of foreign national offenders who've been deported is up by 36%. So that's more than 10,000 that have been deported since this government came to office. He raised specific concerns about the common travel area. I can say that we work closely with the Irish government to protect the integrity and the security of the common travel area, whilst at the same time preserving the rights of British and Irish citizens. But where there is a requirement for us to do more, then of course we'll have to look at that.
In January, I wrote to the Home Secretary because a whistleblower suggested that Border Force lacked sufficient personnel to cover night sailings from Belfast and Larne to my constituency of Fleece and Galloway, where Cairn Ryan is the main port. We've heard today that much more focus is on what is clearly the unlocked back door to the United Kingdom between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. What can the government do to address this and turn to prevent the North Channel between Scotland and Northern Ireland becoming a conduit for illegals and for other contraband?
Well, I'm grateful to him because I think he makes an important point. I met with officials this morning specifically to discuss the points that he has raised. Of course, we will use all of the tools that we have at our disposal to address the points that he raises, including intelligence-led operations. But we look very closely at these things, and where there is a requirement for us to do more, then we will do so.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Honourable Lady from South Belfast for the question, and also for the Security Minister for the way in which he's responded, so characteristically serious and thoughtful. It strikes me that there are three lines of investigation here. One, of course, into the abhorrent act on Monday night, and we have a suspect. Secondly, the disorder that we saw last night, and I heard the Minister say that we have 3 people arrested as suspects there. But there is a third strand around those who seek to incite violence. Can the Minister confirm that that is a third strand of active investigation, that we are seeking to find those people who incited that violence last night, and continue to do so?
Well, I think the Honourable Member makes an important point. I agree with the characterisation that he has made. He's right to reference the attack and the subsequent disorder, but he's also right to reference concerns about those who would seek to initiate violent criminality under these particular circumstances. I give him an absolute assurance that these are matters that we will take incredibly seriously, as I am sure will the police.
Rodriguez.
Speaker, rightly there's been unanimous condemnation of the violence last night in Belfast, as there was for the incident that occurred in North Belfast, the precipitated protest last night. But would he agree with me that 2 years ago, following the Southport attacks, there was similar violence to last night appeared in Northern Ireland? We all condemned that as well. I asked the Deputy First Minister to accompany me to our local hospital to reassure ethnic minority workers in that hospital that we didn't just condemn violence against them, but we stood shoulder to shoulder with them in opposition to that violence. But we need more than just words and standing shoulder to shoulder. We hope there will never be a repeat of last night's violence. But if the government don't deal with the fundamental underlying problem of the previous night, we will have more nights like that one.
Well, I'm grateful to him, not least because it provides me with the opportunity to make the point that I know that he will agree with, that Belfast is a truly great city. It is a place with incredible history and extraordinary character, and I believe it is a place of great potential and possibilities with a very, very bright future ahead of it. And that is why it is so tragic to see the kind of criminal disorder that all of us, I think, would have hoped had been consigned to the past. So I understand the passion with which the Honourable Gentleman speaks, but I hope that he will also understand the commitment that exists from this government to deal with what he describes as being the kind of fundamental underlying problems. He's right to raise those. Nobody is remotely blind to them, and we completely understand the anger. And that is why we are progressing from the Home Office and working with colleagues right across law enforcement and government to make sure that we are making progress with the areas that he references.
Speaker, all that last night's dreadful violence did was terrorise the innocent, self-inflict harm on their own communities, and distract from the awfulness of the North Belfast attack, and indeed distract from the many peaceful protests that there were in my constituency and elsewhere. And on all these issues, the law must take its full course against all illegality wheresoever it came from. But the deadly impact of the continuing open border with the Republic of Ireland for illegal migrants still stands. This government presides over a situation where it is illegal to bring into Northern Ireland a garden plant from Great Britain, but yet we have an open border from the Irish Republic where gentlemen like this Sudanese man can come unhindered, an illegal immigrant, into the United Kingdom. Does the Minister not see the problem?
Well, I certainly agreed with the Honourable Gentleman's framing of his question. And also the point that he actually made about peaceful protest. I know he will understand that my remarks referred only to those engaging in criminal disorder. I've heard the points that he's made about what he describes as an open border. He will have heard the comments that I've made previously, including the point about the very close cooperation that takes place between the Irish police, PSNI and other police services to ensure that there is the most joined up and effective response. But I accept the challenge that he makes, and I accept that this is something that the government is and will need to continue to look at.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House owes a big debt of thanks to the member for Belfast South and Mid Down for raising this question today. Last night, the scenes of racist violence on the streets of Belfast, gangs going door to door looking for foreigners, and the racist abuse being thrown at any minority ethnic person on the streets of Belfast last night were utterly disgusting, as were the attempts by people in Glasgow and Liverpool last night to emulate that and do exactly the same. What message has he got for the far-right racists that are encouraged by parties represented in this House that they will not be allowed to assemble in the next few days and over the weekend to promote the same kind of racist language and violence against minorities within our society? None of this racist stuff builds a house, feeds a child, or educates anybody. Surely what we need to do is unite people together against racism in any form in our society.
Well, I completely agree with the Right Honourable Gentleman. I think he made his point very powerfully. My message is very simple. To those who would consider any kind of racist activity or any further criminality or disorder, my message is very simple. Break the law and get ready to face the full consequences of the law.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I first of all thank the Minister for his thoughtful answers? I think they're helpful for us who ask questions. I condemn totally the violence that took place in Belfast. Yesterday I stood in this place, in this House, and spoke on the right to peacefully protest and to have their government take account of their fears and their views. And as the MP for Strangford, not one stone was thrown by the hundreds and hundreds of people who stood by the cenotaph in Newtownards last night. As women in Zimmer frames, young mothers with children and families stood in companionable silence. The PSNI have confirmed that no thuggery whatsoever took place. They did what they needed to do to have their voice heard. Now it's time for government, Ministers, time for government to do what they need to do and listen and act to the decent and reasonable people who are not thugs and who have valid fear. So will the Minister confirm that the views of these and those reasonable thousands throughout the province who quietly ask for their voice to be heard will not be ignored due to the loud actions of some terrible thugs?
Mr. Speaker, I completely agree with my honourable friend. I think he makes his points in the way that he does very powerfully and with huge experience of these matters. I completely agree with his central point, which is that we must not allow the violent criminality and disorder that we have seen to drown out the important but peaceful voices of those who entirely understandably have concerns and express anger about the situation that we have seen. He's right to make that point, and I give him an absolute assurance of the seriousness with which we take it.
Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I offer you a happy birthday? I forgot to do that during Prime Minister's question time. Can I also thank the Honourable Member for Belfast South and Mid Down for a very balanced statement to this House. Of course, we recognise and commend the efforts of the individuals that intervened on Monday to help the victim and the emergency services, which no doubt were confronted with very challenging scenes last night. My question is very simple. Will the Minister be looking at special courts to expedite matters where we have rioters with harsh sentences so as to act as a deterrence?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to him for the point that he raises. I think he will understand that his question doesn't sit within my ministerial area of responsibility, but I know colleagues elsewhere in government will have heard it, and I'll make sure that he gets a response from them about it.
Mr. Speaker, the victim, Stephen Ogilvie, is actually a health service worker, a radiographer,
And our health service across the United Kingdom, and especially in Northern Ireland, depends on many people working from many nationalities, many communities. So it was abhorrent to see some of those health service workers actually attacked last night by those contemplating and delivering this violence. Can I ask the Minister, what steps is he taking to ensure that all authorities in Northern Ireland have the full support of this government in any action that is needed to be taken against those who are perpetrating the violence, but also those who are acting online to spread the hatred and the violence that we are now seeing? My party leader spoke this morning with the father of the victim, who has made a direct appeal to those spreading disinformation online to stop. And that actually includes the disinformation that his son has died. So what steps can the government take to support the family and the father in their asks?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. He's absolutely right to raise concerns, which I think will be shared across the House, about the attacks that took place on health service workers, whom we owe a huge debt of gratitude for their incredible work. He's also right to raise concerns about activity taking place online, and as I said in an earlier response, that is something we take very seriously and work across government on. I think it's important for me to reiterate that both the Secretary of State and the Parliamentary Under-Secretary from the Northern Ireland office are both in Northern Ireland today. I know that they will be talking to colleagues, and I know that they will be consulting widely across this place to make sure that the support that we provide is proportionate, and where there is more that we need to do to help, then I know that the government's door will be open to that.
And Hussein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The pogroms we witnessed last night should shock the nation. They were horrific in every sense and are bound to have left minority communities across the country terrified. We saw widespread scenes of violent disorder, homes ablaze, and reports of people's cars being stopped and checked on the basis of race. The depraved scenes of violence that triggered the eruptions last night were also absolutely horrific and understandably invoked anger. These are scenes more reminiscent of the darkest chapters of history than modern Britain. We must be honest, something is profoundly wrong. Why is it that isolated incidents are repeatedly followed by such extreme and widespread eruptions of violence? And what failures of policy and governance over the decades have brought us to this point, where anger and vulnerability have become so dangerously heightened and so easily exploited?
Yeah. Listen very carefully to the points that the honourable gentleman made. That there were a number of them. Let me reflect on them, and I'm very happy to discuss them with him further.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for your permission to speak. Having had violence in my constituency last night, I want to say clearly, violence is never the answer and is wrong, and those engaged in that should face the full force of the law. Despite what Sinn Féin tell us, there was always an alternative to violence. We do not want attacks on people, place, homes or businesses. We don't want families feeling unsafe, little children from different ethnic backgrounds feeling afraid or fearful even to go to school. But for the many who are angry and who are scared because of uncontrolled immigration, because of the most barbaric act and footage that has been displayed of the incident just 2 nights ago, people want to see politics and democracy fill the space. So there is significant concern in Northern Ireland about open borders. Will he release the numbers who have crossed into the UK via the Republic of Ireland border? And will the Minister commit, even at a start, to start replicating what ROI do in checking people coming from the United Kingdom, from Northern Ireland to the Republic of Ireland? People need to see this government take action.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to her for her condemnation, and let me say to her that the government do absolutely understand the concerns and are working to address the underlying issues that underpin those concerns. I mean, I think it's important to make the point that on top of increased deportations and removals, we're also seeking to remove the pull factors that would bring people here in the first place. So illegal work arrests are up by 60%. Hotel use is down by 63% since its peak, and asylum claims down by 12%. Much done, much more to do, but absolutely we do understand the concerns.
Speaker, and I joined the House in thanking the member for Belfast South and Mid Down for this UQ and her remarks. And I also associate myself with the condemnation from across the House for the abhorrent attack on Monday evening and the scenes that we witnessed yesterday. Yeah. A pastor at the scene where multiple houses were on fire in North Belfast said people were being put out of houses because they're black. According to media reports, even a 2-month-old baby had to be evacuated by police to safety last night amidst mob violence and rioting in Belfast. That is the reality of what this violence represents. Not legitimate protest, but terrorising innocent families. This is where far-right rhetoric takes us, to pogroms that force police to escort children from their homes. We know from history where this road leads, to a path of destruction and division. So can the Minister tell this House what the government is doing to counter the spread of racism and to ensure that one individual's actions are not used to stigmatise entire communities?
Well, Mr. Speaker, he's absolutely right to say that the scenes that we saw are appalling and unacceptable and are in no way legitimate protest. I hope that I was crystal clear in my opening remarks about what my message was to those who may be considering, or maybe those who've been involved in this kind of violent criminality and disorder. I was crystal clear about the fact that they shouldn't do that, and that anybody who considers doing it needs to be prepared to face the full weight of the law. I'm confident that the police are working at pace to address the scenes that we've seen in recent times. Arrests have already been made, and I have no doubt that we will see further arrests in the very near future. This kind of criminality and disorder is utterly unacceptable.
Adam. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all condemn the actions on Monday night, and we also look with concern at the subsequent rioters. But my concern is those that leave the land possible for such actions to happen, those that politicise, those that weaponise. Mr. Speaker, when I was younger, in the 70s, if somebody was going to attack me for racial reasons, which did happen, you could spot them from a mile away. Now those that instigate racial hatred, wear smart suits, speak the King's English, occupy every radio wave and every television channel, instigating hate. I would like to ask the Minister that we seem to have a repeated measures of this. It's Southport, the Liverpool fans who were run over, the Huntingdon stabbing in the train. People are looking at crime through a lens of racialisation. But many people in this chamber have spoken today in unity as we commemorate 10 years of Joe Cox, speaking about what unites us rather than divides us. So can I ask the Minister to maybe consider a cross-member, cross-party task force to tackle this issue, which is going to affect every single member of our community?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful to the honourable member. I think he makes some very important points, and I think he makes them in a very considered and constructive way. He's right to make the point that words have consequences, and where people stoke the fire, where people seek to incite violent criminality, they should take responsibility and they should be held responsible for their actions. I think that this has been a very constructive and reasonable debate that we've had in the House today. But I think it is particularly for those online to think carefully about the words that they use and the messages deploy. All of us who serve in public life have an absolute responsibility, I think, to do the right thing, to ensure that people act within the law, and to work to bring people together, not drive them apart.
Right, that completes questions led from Benn's changeover.